Here that's not familiar with Ramayana? Okay. That's good, because that's the plan to talk about. Some years ago, during the month of Kartik, for many years, I've been taking groups of devotees to different places, holy places, and eventually it got around to, let's go to Ayodhya and Chitrakoot. So we went. And oh, that was great. Let's go to Dandak Forest and Kishkinda. So we went. And from that experience, I learned a lot, because I'm not so familiar with Ramayana, more with the basic story of the Srimad Bhagavatam of Lord Ramachandra, but not in depth. So then came the idea that aside from the storyline itself, because going to, I don't know how to do the rest of the travel for the next 3 khandas. So personalities from Ramayana became a topic. And coming up in the middle part of October, if everything works out the way that I hope it's going to work out, there'll be 2 weeks, at least every evening, maybe some mornings and evenings, covering different personalities from Ramayana. And it's really invigorating experience for me, just sharing. And so far, while I was in Austin, Texas, preparing for this October event, we discussed Valmiki, and then we discussed Hanuman, part 1, and then we discussed Vibhishan. And each personality is kind of like, there are lessons to learn from them. We discussed Ravana also. So now Vishwamitra Muni. There's a lot to say about him, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover it all this evening. Certainly not in the kind of depth that I would want to later, but this is it's more my experiment or experience, just sharing with you. There's a document that was circulated. It says glossary and genealogy chart. Did you get a copy? Oh, no kidding. Okay. So this is color-coded, and what you got is not, but it gives his birth. So let's do this. Vishwamitra is over here. His father, we hear about his family towards when he reaches Mithila. Satananda, who is the son of Gautama Rishi and the family priest of King Janak, tells the story of his history. And his father, we'll hear some as we go along. Here's his father's name, Gadi. And his father's name, he's one of 4 brothers, over here. And Kusha is a direct son. So Kusha, Kushanaba, Gadi, Vishwamitra, and he has a lot of sons. Over here, these are his descendants. We're going to hear as we go along, he had a sister whose given name was Satyavati, but because her father is up here, Kusha, she's Kaushiki. Another name for Vishwamitra is Kaushika, and Kaushiki. She married Ruchika Muni, and we're going to hear about their third son, Shunashekpa. Another son is Janmadagni. Everyone knows Janmadagni. That's his mother and father. His mother, Janmadagni's mother, is Vishwamitra's sister. I get these family things all kind of jumbled up. It's really hard for me. Even looking at it many times in a family chart, I still get mixed up. So we're going to hear that Shunakshepa has plays a big part in Vishwamitra's life, or a significant part. There's some events that happen. The reference that I heard the most from Srila Prabhupada is the statement that Dasarath made when Vishwamitra first came to visit him. And over and over and over and over and over, Prabhupada would say the Sanskrit, I hishtam yattat punarjanma jayaya, punarjanma jayaya. How are you doing with your process of overcoming birth and death? Prabhupada's explanation is, you see somebody, how's the family, how's business, how's your health? But with the transcendentalist, it's ahishtam yattat punarjanma jayaya, because their objective is overcoming the cycle of birth and death and entering into the realm of transcendence. So that's most outstanding for me. He's from all of this lineage, they're Kshatriya family. Since his father's name was Gadi, Vishwamitra is in the dynasty of Kusha, so he's also known as Kaushika. And I'm going to be looking at my notes because I spent a lot of time the last several days preparing for another seminar series, so I'm looking at my notes a lot. Vishwamitra was a king that ruled over the whole earth for many thousands of years. He was a powerful king. He had an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, elephants, chariots, etc., etc. And from time to time, he would travel with his whole entourage within his kingdom, going to many cities, many states, and so forth. On one of the occasions, he paid a visit to the hermitage of the sage Vashishta. Vashishta plays a big role in Ramayana. He later leaves the forest and becomes the chief priest of King Dasarath in Ayodhya. But when they have their meeting, he's in the forest. And the people that live in the forest, the sages that live in the forest, they live with lots of austerity. They just live on water and air, or sometimes leaves that fall from trees. And sometimes they have a big feast on fruits and roots. But otherwise, their life is a very austere life. They have mastery of their senses. And when he came to Vashishta's residence, the ashram, there are many other sages also there. And as you see from this old painting, there's somebody up on the left side, somebody upside down hanging from a tree, doing some kind of a austerity. There's a fire down below, and they do intense things. So when he came to Vashishta's hermitage, Vashishta was very happy to receive him. He is the king of the world. And Vashishta is a great, great, great Brahma Rishi, a greatest amongst the Brahmanas. And he welcomed him very warmly, although his living situation was quite simple. And he expressed a desire, after their exchange with, lively, lovely exchange, to serve him and his whole army a giant feast. And Vishwamitra said that we shouldn't impose upon you. You're living in such a simple way here in the forest. There's no need. And it's very kind of you. And it was all those politenesses were exchanged back and forth. But Vashishta was very firm. He wanted to do this, and he said, for me it'll be no problem. Over here I have Subala, the celestial cow, and she'll be able to provide everything. And just by saying so, voila, you see on the right side all the massive arrangements of so many things. The list of things is really big, described in Ramayana. And whatever he asked for, she's a wish-fulfilling cow. And she supplied it all. And all the soldiers and Vishwamitra Muni and everybody and the animals and the elephants and the horses and everyone was sumptuously fed. So Vishwamitra was really wowed. And he developed an attraction to Subala. And being a king, he was used to getting what he wants. But he was being respectful to Vashishta, so he offered a gift. Vast amounts of wealth in exchange for your cow, Subala. Vashishta was not inclined. He said, I have no need for wealth, and I'm completely attached to Subala. My existence is so intimately connected to Subala. I have to decline. And Vashishta then threatened him and said, either you give me Subala or I'll take Subala. So he engaged his army to take her away forcibly. And she was crying, as cows will do, making loud noise. And Vashishta said nothing. So this was a speaking cow. She said, aren't you going to do anything? And he said, well, I'm a Brahmana, and I'm to be tolerant and not become engaged in combat. And so certainly I can't bear separation from you, but what can I do? She said, just give the word. Just say stop. So he said, stop. And from the body of Subala came huge armies. Innumerable warriors continuously came from Subala's body and completely annihilated Vishwamitra's army. Well, along with his army, Vishwamitra had 100 sons. And those 100 sons became really angry. They're on the left side. And the army on behalf of Sabala was on the right side next to her. So they started charging Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra just uttered a Vedic mantra, and they became a pile of ashes. Poof. Here's the pile of ashes. And down here is the army that got destroyed by Sabala's military. And everyone was dead except Vishwamitra. So he was a king, and he wasn't used to being defeated, and he also wasn't used to getting what he wanted. And so he decided that he would go into the forest, perform austerities for a long time, seek the favor of Lord Shiva, and receive the favor of Lord Shiva. There you see Lord Shiva giving his favor to Vishwamitra. He wanted the use of all celestial weapons and the weapons themselves. This weapon, that one, the other weapon, so many weapons. And Lord Shiva departed. So off Vishwamitra went with all these weapons and another big army. And he started to attack Vishishta. And when he was attacking Vishishta with all of his celestial weapons, Vishishta stood his ground. And he just held up this little stick that yogis sometimes have, and all the weapons just were drawn into that stick. And then, in his disappointment of what Vishwamitra had just done, his body started bursting forward with flames. And the demigods descended and said, "Oh, most noble soul, extinguish the fire blazing from your body and save the world." So he withdrew the flames and said to Vishwamitra, "I hold no animosity towards you. Please just don't make that mistake again. You may go now." Very peaceful and tolerant and very, very powerful. So it's Sabala and Vishishta again in their hermitage in the forest. So a little light went on with Vishwamitra Muni. Being a Kshatriya, the power of my arms and my soldiers and my wealth are nothing in comparison to the power of an austere Brahmin. So he got this idea that he wanted to become equal Brahma Rishi or Brahmarshi. So it took a while. He went to the southern part of the country, and for 1,000 years, now this is a different age, for 1,000 years he underwent austerities, very severe austerities, they're described. And Brahma came after 1,000 years and conferred upon him the title of Rajarshi. But he didn't want Raja Rishi, he wanted Brahma Rishi. So back to doing some more austerities. And while he was still in the southern part of India, he was doing his austerities, and one of the kings in the line of Ikshvaku, his name was Trishanku. And while Vishwamitra was in the forest doing his austerities, Vishishta had at that time been invited to go to Ayodhya and be the chief priest in Ayodhya. So Trishanku went to Vishishta and made the request. Can you make this arrangement? You're a very powerful Brahmana. I'd like to ascend to the heavenly realm in my self-same body. And Vishishta said, no. Let's see. Yeah. said something very specific. Yeah. No man can attain heaven other than at the end of his life, after the performance of piety and religion. This is the universal rule established by God. Therefore, I shall not perform any sacrifice with the aim of placing you in heaven in your present body. You should give up this sinful desire. Well, Trishanku didn't want to take no for an answer, so he went to the 100 sons of Vishishta and said, can you help me? I want what I want. And they scolded him and said, our father and your guru already told you it's not to be done. So we curse you by disobeying and violating and trying to overstep your spiritual master. We curse you, you become an untouchable, a Chandala. So Trishanku is now a Chandala, roaming around as a Chandala, but he's not given up his desire. So he understood Vishvamitra is a very powerful sage. Maybe he'll help me. So he went to Vishvamitra. And Vishvamitra was compassionate, and he was also a little bit like, in a competitive spirit with Vishishta still. And so he agreed. And he said, I'll do a yajna where you can ascend into heaven in your self-same body. And he arranged a big yajna, invited everybody to come. Now the 100 sons of Vishishta didn't come. But others were afraid if they didn't come, they might get, some bad reaction from Vishvamitra's anger. Fearing Vishvamitra's prowess, all the sages attended the yajna except Vishishta's 100 sons, who refused to take part in such a sacrifice. Enraged, Vishvamitra cursed these 100 sons to become nishadas, forest-dwelling hunters, sons of dog-eaters, for 700 lifetimes. Whew. He's got a hot temper. Now, the demigods didn't attend either, because when sages would perform sacrifices, demigods would come to receive the oblations, and they didn't come. But he kept going on anyways. He began the sacrifice, followed all the Vedic procedures. A big blazing fire, he uttered all the mantras, pouring ghee, and at the proper moment, he uttered, "Witness my ascetic powers. By my command, this king shall rise to heaven. Even in this body of flesh and bones, O Trishanku, by virtue of the merits of my austerities, ascend now to heaven, where she'll attain the state of the gods." And as he spoke, Trishanku levitated, rising up in the air. Unfortunately, when he reached the heavenly region, Indra said no. And in a voice of booming thunder, "O king, how are you trying to enter heaven? You have earned no place here through religion or piety. Indeed, your own preceptor, Vishishta, has refused your legal desire for heaven. O foolish man, fall headlong back to earth." So that was a problem. That's what happened. He started crashing down towards earth. And he called out Vishishta's name very loudly. And, Vishvamitra's name very loud. So there's the Trishanku descending. There's the denizens of heaven up on the upper right of that image. And there's the yajna down below that Vishvamitra is doing. And some of the sages were attending out of fear of having a problem with Vishvamitra. There he is. this upside down. He comes in contact with Indra somehow, and he's calling out for help, upside down. There's upside down Trishanku. And there's Vishwamitra with his little stick in his right hand, pondering what to do to help Trishanku, because he doesn't want to have him bonk on the head, upside down. Another very, very ancient painting. So what does he do? He raises his left hand and makes a command to the demigods. Stop! And he stopped. He was hanging upside down in the air. Okay, something happened. There's a page missing. Oh, there it is. I'll have to get more organized with all this. Immediately the king's downward progress was halted, and he remained situated in the sky, upside down. Seated amid many rishis, the great sage Vishwamitra became overwhelmed with anger at seeing Indra's refusal to allow Trishanku into heaven. He said, "Since this jealous god will not let the king attain the heavenly regions, I shall now create a second heaven. By dint of my mystic power, Trishanku shall then live there in peace." Like another Brahma, Vishwamitra evolved from his mind a galaxy consisting of 27 lunar mansions, which appeared in the southern sky. The sage then set about creating another hierarchy of gods to inhabit those heavenly planets. He's a powerful person. Observing this disturbance to the universal situation, Indra and the gods became alarmed and approached Vishwamitra, saying, "This king does not deserve a place in heaven. Rejected by his own guru, he now stands divested of all pious merits." Vishwamitra, "As I have pledged my word to this king, how shall I make it false? A promise of heaven has been given by me, therefore, please let this king enjoy heavenly bliss and let the lunar mansions I created remain in existence." Stalemate, right? Indra, out of respect for the great Vishwamitra, replied, "It shall be so. Your planets will endure in the heavens, in the southern quarter beyond the celestial sphere. Trishanku shall remain in their midst, as happy as a god and shining brightly. All those stars shall circumambulate him, even as all the planets circle the pole star. May you be blessed." Well, sounds like a happy ending. Or at least it wasn't a Star Wars or something. There's Trishanku upside down in the separate set of planetary systems and everything. But then Vishwamitra realized, anger got me again. I've lost the merit of so much piety again. And so I'll have to go do some more austerity somewhere. So he goes somewhere else to do some more austerities. And there's another problem. This one he doesn't have to use lots of austerities for. But his sister, remember he has a sister? Kaushiki, or Satyavati, another one of her names. They have 3 sons. Remember from that flow chart? Jamadagni is one, and Shuna Kshepa is another. So what happened is not King Ambarish, who is the same Ambarish to read about in the 9th canto, but another person by the same name. He was doing a sacrifice, a horse sacrifice. And he was getting really good at the horse sacrifice. But Indra came along and stole a human sacrificial offering. Here's how it happened. When Indra stole the horse, the priests told the king, you have to find the horse, because you're in big trouble if the sacrifice is interrupted. And if you can't find the horse, then you can have a human sacrifice. He couldn't find the horse. So he had this idea, he'll go to Rishi Kamuni. He has 3 sons, maybe he'll help. And the 2 sons, Ambarish and the other son, they declined. And the 3rd son, Shunakshepa, being not favored as much by his mother and father, he volunteered, I'll go. And then the king was really happy, and the assistants of the king were taking him. And as he was moving along, he reached Pushkar, where he had some second thoughts. No, I don't think I want to do that. So then he went to his sister's brother, his uncle, and asked for help. He wanted to be rescued. So Vishwamitra, he also had 100 sons, and he went to his 100 sons and asked, would any of you be willing to volunteer to take Shunakshepa's place? And they said, what? You're unwilling to sacrifice the life of a nephew? We want to sacrifice the life of one of your own sons? We don't understand. And Vishwamitra became angry again, and he cursed his sons that they would become dog eaters for 1,000 years. Then he turned to Shunakshepa and made the following recommendation. You can go ahead. I'm going to initiate you in 2 mantras and train you in 2 mantras, one for Vamanadev, one for Indra. And when this whole situation comes about, you can go to the king and say, I'm ready to go, let's go. And you just, it'll all work out. So Shunakshepa had trust in Vishwamitra, and so he learned the mantras. And sure enough, when the sacrifice was ready to be performed, he said those 2 mantras, and the sacrifice went ahead. He didn't lose his life, and he felt very much indebted to Vishwamitra Muni. And then later he became a great personality, a self-realized sage. This is all in the narration that Gautama Rishi's son is narrating to everybody when Vishwamitra Muni reaches Mithila. So Vishwamitra remained in Pushkar for another 1,000 years, more austerities, very severe austerities, at the end of which he got another title, a Rishi title. Brahma came, well done, well done. So he continued doing his penances at Pushkar, and when he was at Pushkar, didn't say, in this case it wasn't, Menaka was sent by Indra, usually that's the way it works. But she was there at Pushkar, and the celebrated story that we hear so often, just the tinkling of her ankle bells broke his meditation, and he was finished. This very interesting painting, it shows some of the austerities that Vishwamitra was doing, in the heat of the summer with fire on all sides, in the cold of the winter, up to his neck in the cold water, and hanging upside down, and so forth and so on. So when she came, he couldn't, as soon as he opened his eyes, hearing her tinkling ankle bells, he was finished. he became attracted to her. They lived together for 100 years. And then a little light went on saying, I did it again, I got distracted. And so he didn't become angry at her. He realized it was just his own foolishness. She was worried he was going to make some big scene. And she departed. So there he goes again. Now he went to the Himalayas along the bank of a river that bears the name of his sister, Kaushiki River. And long austerities, and now just a rishi, but Maharishi, or Maharshi. Brahma determined you're not fully self-controlled, sense-controlled yet. Okay, so more austerities on the bank of this sacred river. And lo and behold, Indra gets nervous again. So he sent a celestial maiden, an apsara named Ramba, to go. And she didn't want to go. She said anything could happen. He has such an anger. And Indra convinced her to go. He said, I'll go, don't worry, I'll go with you, and one of my associates will go with you. We'll go as nightingales, and we'll sing nice songs while you're doing your thing, and he'll be moved, and everything will be nice. Well, that's not what happened. The nightingales sang, but Vishwamitra checked himself and cursed her to become a stone for 10,000 years. So again, his austerities are depleted. There's another painting with the nightingales in the background. That's a little note there is mine. That's Lord Indra. And Lord Indra realized, uh-oh. So he quickly departed, as Ramba is standing there as a stone column for 10,000 years. So now he left the Himalaya region, he back into the southern region. Even more severe penances. The description of what he did was very intense. There we see Brahma. You see on the right side there's Indra, because there's his elephant, and it doesn't say who is riding that little peacock there. But and the gods, they came, and they granted him again the status of Maharishi, which wasn't what he wanted. So another 2,000 years of great austerity. He lives a long time. And finally, Brahma understood, this is it. He's controlled the senses, so he confers upon him the status that he wanted. He wanted to become equal, not surpass, but equal status, equally powerful, equally respected, equally everything. But his devotional life hasn't even begun yet, but it's about to begin. Because somehow or another, Vishwamitra, now there's different explanations of why he went and asked for Ram to come. One explanation is he had some deeper understanding that Ram is meant to marry Sita. Somehow he understood that. And he wanted the glory of Ram to be established in the world. So he visits Ayodhya. There's the rishi in the center. There's the king on the far left. And the way these paintings go, the same personality is shown in multiple places in the painting. He's also, the king looks like the same king is down here as up here. In any case, Vishwamitra arrives in Ayodhya. He's received very nicely by the king. Here's the king who's being fanned, and here's the rishi coming to visit him. And as he enters, comes this, seated right here, this is Vashishta. Of course, this is Ram and Lakshman. And that's Dasarath, the king. So here's the first statement that the king makes. He rises, very, very happy. The celebrated Rishi has come to his kingdom. Ahishtam yattat punarjanma jayaya. How are you doing? How are you faring with your efforts to overcome birth and death? Is everything going well in your endeavor to conquer the repetition of birth and death? And very quickly, Vishwamitra gets right down to business, why he has come, and he describes the purpose. He's been residing in a forest, a very wonderful forest, but it has a difficulty. There are some demons, Rakshasa demons in the forest, and he would like Ram to come with him and destroy those demons. And Dasarath is perplexed, more than perplexed. He is shocked. Why would he want a 12-year-old boy to come take me? It's this, the way you've described this challenge makes it sound even formidable and difficult for me to fulfill. So let me come with my whole army and I'll take care of these Rakshasas. And that's not what Vishwamitra wanted. And so it's not a long speech. I mean, he's raising his arm like he's going to smack him or something. But he just says something very simple. Please confirm this is your understanding and I'll leave the same way that I came. And Vashishta knows what that means, because he knows the history of Vishwamitra and his temper and things like that. So he intercedes and says, Vishwamitra could destroy these demons without the help of you or anybody. He doesn't need anybody's help. He can create a universe. He can certainly destroy a couple demons. He wants to bring glory to your sons. And don't worry, yes, they're young, but they'll be well protected in Vishwamitra's presence. And everything will be all right. So Dasarath, fortunately, has all faith and rightly reposed faith in Vashishta. And he quickly does a turnaround and agrees. My two sons can go. So it's in the morning, and off they go. And Vishwamitra is walking and walking and walking. Doesn't even turn behind. He just, the two boys are following behind him. The way that Ramayana describes it, he was testing their capacities. And they kept up with him, and although they're just 12-year-old boys, they remain fast throughout the whole day. And at the end, as the sun was setting, they stopped their activities, and he becomes so pleased with them, with their stamina and determination, that one of the first things he does as a gift is he gives them two mantras, Bala and Ati Bala mantra. And they have all these nice benedictions. They won't become tired, and they won't be defeated, and so many nice things that these two mantras bestow upon the person who has received them. And they take rest. Here's chanting of these mantras bestows upon the reciters the benediction of no tiredness, no fever, no hunger, no thirst, nor will enemies be able to attack them or disfigure them when they are asleep. So that's pretty good. And off they go. The next day, they're traveling on the way to this place where Tataka is, and he's all the while entertaining them by giving them teachings of ancient histories because he's a vastly learned personality. And he is developing a lot of affection for them, and they're developing affection for him. There's a number of nice paintings where in the evening they're massaging his legs and feet, and he's allowing them to do that little service. And the affection between the two lords and their servant Vishwamitra, the role relationship is going to shift from their serving him to his shifting to completely serving them. In fact, there's a strong parental affection that starts to awaken. Now, his bhakti life is becoming alive in their association, naturally so. Now, they're taking the role of young boys, and he's taking the role of an old sage. So he's giving teachings and stories and things, but it's going deeper than that. It's the affection of loving service. So there's a very nice verse in Ramayana. The Sanskrit isn't here, but the translation is here. The next morning, second morning when they wake up, he recites this verse. The translation is, "How fortunate is Kaushalya, who has begotten you as her son. The sun has risen in the east. Now you, my dear Lord, tiger among men, please arise and perform those duties that are considered divine." This very mantra, or saying, is used by Sri Vaishnavas in their morning puja. When they wake the deity, they recite this verse commonly. I mean, I don't know how universally it is, but commonly, right? Because there's a very strong affinity for seeing Lord Ramachandra as an incarnation of Narayana, and the way to approach Narayana as the way to approach Ramachandra is through surrender and service. And so the whole of Ramayana represents a treatise on surrender and service. So this is it's a very important literature for Sri Vaishnavas, as the Bhagavatam is for us. And this is it's part of their worship, their deity worship, every morning, reciting this sloka from Ramayana. And from time to time, we're not going to go into the details because of time doesn't permit. It'll take hours and hours. But he recites many, many Puranic histories. Now on the left side it shows bullock carts, but as far as I know there weren't bullock carts. It was just walking on foot. He tells the story of the river Sarayu's appearance in history and the descent of Mother Ganges. Now, a document that I hope you have also received. There's two documents. One is what is stated in Valmiki Ramayana about the descent of the Ganges, spoken by Vishwamitra as they're traveling. And there's other sources in the Bhagavatam and other places that describe the descent of the Ganges. It's very fascinating. And they're very close. There's some details that are different. And his place is the Siddha ashram, and it has a connection with Lord Vamanadev, which I think we'll recite. So there's different paintings of his giving nice teachings, and he's like a teacher, father figure for the two boys. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to have to change my notes to include, there's a nice description of the Siddha ashram. And its connection with Vamanadev. But I don't have the notes and I don't remember it well enough. So they come to this forest that's a place where Tathaka is. And he gives the history of, as they're entering into the forest, they ask, this looks godforsaken, what happened here? And there's a nice story is that when Indra, after having killed Vritrasura, he underwent austerities. Now it's described in the sixth canto, of the Bhagavatam, that he underwent austerities for some time. Sixth canto? No. Yes. Anyway, having killed Vritrasura. And the place where he underwent those austerities and became purified, became sanctified, and he was very pleased by the atmosphere in which he was, and he gave a benediction that 2 kingdoms would flourish in this area, and they flourished for a long time. Then when Tathaka came to that place, everybody left. And it became very desolate and eerie and shrieking birds and things like that. So, wouldn't want to run into that lady. This is it. So Vishwamitra said, this is it. So we get ready because Tathaka will come. So Ram twanged his bow and made a really loud sound, and that roused the anger of Tathaka. She came screeching forward. The first thing she did, it says, she created a big dust storm so they couldn't see anything. And, screaming and, disappearing and, doing mystical things. But Ram was hesitating. And so this is a detail. It's an important detail because culturally women are not to be punished in this way. So Vishwamitra said, don't hesitate. I told you before. She's a demoness. She's eaten alive many sages. She's, you must kill her. And Ram said, my father said, whatever you said, I'm to do that, so I will. He's obedient to his father. And in turn, Vishwamitra. So after Tathaka was slayed, there's a number of paintings showing this. That old style painting on the left. She looks pretty wild. And it's Arabic. I mean, the story of Ram has, one of the classes I gave is where are there versions of Ramayana other than Valmiki Ramayana, and they stretch all over the world, at least, Southeast Asia, it's all in Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, in their local language. They know the whole Ram story. He is very celebrated. So it's Arabic people, right, reading and diving into Ramayana. So there's Ram releasing an arrow, piercing the body of Tathaka, and she falls to the ground dead. Now here she's running at them, but, there's another. She's got a tree, she's going to whack them with a tree. And the dioramas showing the Leela. And after Tathaka is killed, the Devatas make a request of Vishwamitra that he's the one that's going to help us overcome Ravan, give him celestial weapons and how to retract them. So he does. And next, they continue a little bit further. It's not the same place where Tathaka was killed. they go to Siddha Ashram. It's 7:32. So there's he tells the history of what's the connection with Vamana Dev and the Siddha Ashram, and it was a very celestial place. So he said, when this yajna will span over several days, and you should be awake 24/7. And because the Maricha and Subahu, there's two sons of Tataka, they may come at any time, and they're always ruining our sacrifices. That's why I went all the way to Ayodhya to get you to come. So when they show, so they started asking details, and by that time he was already observing Monavrata, and the assistant said he can't talk to you, but just stand guard and be ready. So there they are, standing guard and being ready. And the yajna is going on. And the evening of the final day of the yajna, Maricha and Subahu come out of the sky to do their thing, defiling the sacred arena and throwing pus and blood and stool and bad stuff on the arena. And the big wind, the big noise. And here they come with their swords raised, but they're in the sky. And immediately Ram and Lakshman know what to do. Now this painting shows Vishwamitra telling them something, but he's not telling them something because he's engaged in the yajna. Here he is engaged in the yajna. And Subahu is killed. As you know, Vishwamitra is hit with an arrow. Now, why Ram did the way that he did is to enhance, as far as I understand, the rest of the Leela. Maricha's got a role to play later on. So he didn't kill Maricha, but the arrow sent him flying 800 miles, or 100 yojanas, out into the sea. That's a powerful arrow. And Subahu was killed. And there's some detail that happens later that's not connected with Vishwamitra, but we'll do that another time. So it's over. The sages are happy, and they spend the evening at the ashram, and now they're considering maybe go back to Ayodhya, but Vishwamitra has another idea. The other idea he has, let's go visit Mithila, we're not so far away. And there's a nice event that you can take part in. There's this special bow of Lord Shiva, and you could go see the bow of Lord Shiva and King Mithila, King Janaka, he's a great personality. So they start heading that way, and they get to the Sona River, and the history of the Sona River is narrated. And it goes something like this. Long ago, his ancestor, Kusha, who was a direct son of Lord Brahma, resided along the bank of the Sona River. And Kusha had 4 sons. One of those 4 sons was Kushanaba. And Kusha gave kingdoms in different areas. Kushanaba ruled along the Sona. In his marriage, he had 100 daughters. And they weren't yet married, but they were very beautiful. And Vayu came along, he's narrating this. Vayu came along, and he was like, hey, let's get together. And they said, you have to talk to our father. So he was insulted. So they were transformed into very ugly hunchback girls. And they went back and told their dad, Kushanaba. And it's already done. Vayu's cursed them. So he's waiting, Kushanaba's waiting for the right opportunity to somehow have his daughters married, because that's the duty of a father. And then there's a little side story. there was these 100 daughters married Brahmadatta, who was a mind-born son of Chuli, and the Gandharvi Somada. So there's a mind-born son of Chuli. Chuli is a brahmachari, and he had a son born from his mind, and his name was Brahmadatta. And Brahmadatta married a Gandharvi named Somada. And Brahmadatta was then requested as a king, by Kushanaba, would you marry my daughters? And he agreed. And as their hands were touched in marriage, their bodies became normal again. That curse of Vayu was gone. And one of their sons, the sons of Kushanaba, was King Gadi. Because he had 100 daughters, but he didn't have a son, so he performed a yajna. He had a son, Gadi, and Gadi became Vishwamitra's father. So that was a little history told by Vishwamitra about the Sona, the river Sona, and its relevance. They continue further. They're going to cross the Ganga, and Ram wants to know the history of the descent of the Ganga. And it's a long story, and you can read it. Different versions. The Ramayana version is very nice. This image is a celebrated image. There's many, many nice paintings where the Ganges descends on earth, and she's willing to descend on earth, but she has to have somebody catch her, so they approach Shiva. Shiva agrees, and he catches the water in his hair. And Uma's there over to the left, and their bull carrier, Nandi, is there. It's a long story, so you can read about it. They continue after crossing the Ganges, heading close to the kingdom of Mithila, or the kingdom of Videha, and they come to Gautama's ashram. And the celebrated thing happens. Of course, there's different versions of Ramayana, but many of the versions of Ramayana say that Gautama's ashram was visited by Indra. Indra made himself appear to look like Gautama, and he seduced Ahalya, his wife. And when Gautama returned and understood what happened, although she didn't say anything, he understood what happened. He understood that you knew that wasn't me, it was Indra, because Indra was caught running away when Gautama came back. And that's why he got cursed to have so many eyes on his body. This is a photograph of the current day place where this pastime occurred. Lord Ramchandra relieved Ahalya from the curse. Her husband cursed her. You remain here, one version, the popular version, as a stone, and you'll be relieved from being a stone when Lord Ramachandra comes and places his foot on your stone body. So he does that at Vishwamitra's indication, and she offers her prayers. He offers his blessings to her. Gautama comes back, and everything's nice again. Now, the son of Gautama and Ahalya became, in course of time, the chief priest of Janak. So he knows, because he knows Vishwamitra from not only this particular episode, he was very relieved to hear that his mother was now freed from this curse. So they continue on to Mithila. Yeah. Gautama returns, shown at the bottom down here. He's back in his hermitage, and he's very happy that his wife has now learned her lesson, etc. Ram and Lakshman along with Vishwamitra, enter Mithila. And they're welcomed. So this is the painting where there Ram and Lakshman and Vishwamitra enter the kingdom. And there's King Janak receiving them very nicely. This is King Janak and his priest. Looks like King Janak and his priest making offerings. This is the current Janakapuri. Probably not what it looked like when Janaka was there, but it's a nice building indicating the kingdom of King Janak at his headquarters. So it as is done socially, Shatananda narrates the history of Vishwamitra, and everyone's like really amazed to hear all this history of this celebrated personality. And let's see if we can identify who's who. There's Lakshman, Ram, and Vishwamitra, and there's the king and Shatananda. They're meeting one another over here and sitting over here having their nice discussions. And King Janaka, Vishwamitra invites him to narrate the history of Lord Shiva's bow, because there's a festival that's going to occur. And down here is a little Jagya fire and so forth. So the history is Lord Shiva had a big battle with Lord Vishnu, and Vishnu won. And after the battle, Lord Shiva gave his bow to the Devatas. After some time, the Devatas gave that same bow to an ancestor of King Janak, to a king by the name Devarata. And then that bow was kept in the kingdom under the rule of the kings of Mithila. And every day they were worshipping the bow with sandalwood paste flowers, etc. So that was the condition to lift and string the bow to win the hand of Sita. And so he starts telling the history of how Sita was born. And we all know, the plowing of the field for the purpose of a yagya. And from the field came the golden girl. Sita came right from the earth. This is the place, the current place, where Lord Sita was born, or Sita Devi was born. Then the bow is brought before the assembly. You know the long story, something like 300 men in a cart that has wheels, and they couldn't lift it. Nobody could lift it. Sita could lift it. That's another story. One of the explanations is since Sita can lift it, you got to have a king that can do at least what Sita can do. And there's different descriptions of her lifting that bow. One of the descriptions is King Janak wanted her to learn domestic duties, so he gave her parts of the palace to keep clean. So one of those parts of the palace was where the bow was kept. And so every day she'd, with one hand lift the bow and the other hand clean underneath the bow and then put the bow back down. And he knew, wow. Whew. So there's Ram seeing the bow, and he looks to Vishwamitra, seeking acknowledgement, it's okay, and he lifts the bow, and not only lifts the bow, he strings the bow, not only strings the bow, but he breaks the bow. And there's different paintings. This is an old one. He's breaking the bow. There's the cart where the bow is. And here's our BBT painting that's been embellished a little bit with a big cracking image. And that's it. So Sita marries Ram. And little research says that Ram was 12 and Sita was 9. And Sita had a sister. So it was suggested, how about Sita's sister marries Lakshman? Now it shows Lakshmana is at much shorter height. They're actually different by 24 hours, but that's okay. Still the older brother. And then a suggestion is made, if I recall correctly, it's Vishwamitra. Don't you have a brother? Your brother's name is Kushadwaj. Doesn't Kushadwaj have 2 daughters? Wouldn't it be really nice if all 4 brothers were to marry these 4 girls? And, Kushadwaj is into it, and that's what happens. They send a messenger to Mithila. Ram doesn't say yes or no. I have to follow what my father says. So his father is very happy, and they come, and the wedding takes place. All 4, it's a nice wedding. And, it's celebrated part of the Ramayana. Here's the names of who married whom. Of course, Sita and Ram, Urmila and Lakshmana, and then the 2 daughters of Makaradwaj. They're their names. And so the marriage is finished, and after the marriage is finished, then Vishwamitra's part in Ramayana is over. We don't hear about him again. He goes to the North Country, and the commentators speak of all of what he went through. He went through like a king who was proud and vicious, and he learned some lessons. He was capable of immense austerity. Eventually, he was very kind-hearted. He helped people whenever he could, even it meant sacrificing what he wanted to achieve. And he had a bit of a hot temper. And he eventually became a Brahmana. He went from, by birth and by spirit, a Kshatriya, to a Brahmana, from controlling his senses. Lots and lots of austerities, that was their method. And then he became a devotee by the mercy of Lord Ramachandra. Very special personality in the whole of Ramayana. And his name, Vishwamitra, Mitra means friend, so it means friend of the world. And the last slide is right here. This is found in Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Vanamali Gataka, a resident of Navadvip and a Brahmana by caste, arranged the marriage of Lord Chaitanya and Lakshmi Devi. He was formerly Vishwamitra, who negotiated the marriage of Lord Ramachandra. And later he was the Brahmana who negotiated the marriage of Lord Krishna with Rukmini. Now negotiated, he just carried a message, but same personality. That same Brahmana acted as the marriage maker of the Lord in Chaitanya Leela. So we don't necessarily think of, Vishwamitra's thing as he was a matchmaker. He did a few other things. Very celebrated person, very, very powerful, very important person, and lots of lessons about moving from what he was doing to becoming an elevated devotee. And so lots of service. Okay. Almost an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know how it's going to work when I go into more detail. They're going to have to expand the clock or something. I'll warn them to be patient. Something like that. So any questions or discussion? Yeah?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for narrating. I always feel very inspired hearing the story of Vishwamitra. I just really appreciate that all of the, his journey and the reminder that material mistakes, while there are consequences, don't impede spiritual progress.
Great.
The one part that I'm seeking
It inhibited, but it didn't stop it.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
One thing that's not so clear to me is the Trishanku episode, when there was this consequence of creating this parallel heavenly realm, which is going to continue to exert, unfavorable influences on the already existing creation. What does, I guess, responsibility and rectification look like? Because he obviously continued to perform austerities and make progress, but the results of that, I guess maybe I'll call it a mistake, are still going to be there even after he has achieved that status as a devotee.
The question you're asking is a little different than the question I wanted to ask, and I probably should. What's his name? Antardweep, who is in charge of the TOVP. Are there really 27 additional nakshatras in the sky besides the 27 that astronomy and astrology deal with? Because for some time he was, very involved in astrology as well as astronomy. So that was my question. Does it still exist? Because your question is there? How do you retract a mistake if it's like it's there permanently? That's your question. My question: is it there permanently? Does Vedic cosmology or Western or whatever, does anybody, any scientific or other people acknowledge this second set of celestial bodies? Because it includes devas that are populating those places. I don't know of any other reference source that speaks of a parallel set of everything. So I don't know how to answer your question, because I don't know if it even exists. Now, if it does still exist, I don't know if it does or doesn't. If it does, there must be some purpose that the Creator has, the Supreme Lord Krishna has, for there to be a parallel something. And as far as I understand, Trishanku is still upside down there. That was the concession. You're going to stay there, but you got to be upside down. I don't know.
Maybe could you speak then on the principles of rectification and responsibility for those types? Like, regardless if the structure is there or not, I'm sure I've made many mistakes that have permanent effects. And
well, it depends on what the mistake is. First of all, in principle, the mistakes happen, and the next is we're responsible for our mistakes, not somebody else. And so your question is, what does it look like? And I think it depends on what the mistake is, and the gravity of it, and so forth. Now, time heals. One of the there's this whole why do bad things happen to good people, and it's a principle is you can't just pile a bunch of good and it takes care of the bad. It just like balances out and cancels it out. So it doesn't work that way. The bad is still, it has its weight on the pan scale, and so it gets relieved by the consequence being fulfilled. So we bear the consequence. Now, one of the principles for the lives of devotees is bhakti, which means Krishna, eliminates those reactions. Bhakti has the power to burn the reactions. But that's maybe how it's sinfully impacting on you. But what about other people that aren't engaged in devotional service? So it's there's nothing permanent here. So how's the impermanence going to play out? Because of some mistake, and there's consequences that impact other people. like, how people in the age of Kali are plundering the earth. But the earth will heal in time. Or just, covering this topic of when the Prachetas were underwater for 10,000 years doing meditation, and their father, meanwhile, who requested them to do their tapa, he also left for the forest. So everything was neglected. When they came out of the water, there was vegetation and everything. There was no tillable land. So they became human torches and started torching all the trees and vegetation. So there was vegetation, then there wasn't vegetation, and then they torched it all, and then it came back to normal again. So, what is there in this world that is permanent? There's nothing in this world that's permanent. So we bear consequences, and even other people that some mistake that's made, what Germany did or what the U.S. did, dropping a bomb on Hiroshima, and what people, there's consequences. There's consequences, and it's not a permanent consequence, but there's consequences. So, what to do about those things? You just own up to the mistake, and as it's reasonable for you to do something because of the mistake, you put something on the other side of the pan scale. It doesn't take away the mistake, but you serve Krishna and put something on the other side. Try to not let the earth heal, for example, instead of exploit. Live a lifestyle that's more like that. Okay.
I have like a comment mixed with a question, but I actually have a very different, I guess I went a different direction than Yashodananda Prabhu did when I was hearing Vishwamitra's story. And I was thinking, like, as I was hearing how he did this many years of penance and then he became this rishi, but then he wanted to become that rishi. So he did this, like he did a PhD of meditation, and then he still ended up like, ended up kind of in this, I don't want to say the same place because obviously he was more powerful.
Yeah, more powerful. That was he wanted power.
Yeah.
He wanted Brahma Tejas, not just, austerity Tejas. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I was kind of seeing it as like a warning that if you just do mode of goodness, that's kind of where, like, you won't automatically go to bhakti. Bhakti has to be there. But then I saw him meet Ram, and so I was wondering, like, did his austerities gradually get him there because he was...
No.
Okay.
That's a nice... Somehow, from all this history that before he went to Ayodhya, something happened, and it's not narrated. I'm not conversant enough in Ramayana to know what happened. Maybe I'll ask that question of our Ramayana scholars. What happened? Because we know the principle. The principle is bhakti awakens from bhakti. Somehow he had this understanding that Ram should marry Sita. Now, how did he get that idea? And where did his bhakti come from? Where did his bhakti start? What was that seed that started his bhakti life? And it wasn't the austerities. Or, the bell rang and now he is a Brahma Rishi. Certified by Lord Brahma. You have control of your senses. I anoint you as Brahma Rishi. That doesn't qualify for bhakti. So, what's that turning point? I'll ask, and it's a nice question. You have an answer? Who? Is he here? Oh. Oh, Nityananda Pran, what's your answer to that question? I didn't know you were here. Hi, Krishna.
I only heard how Vishwamitra
Transition from Vishwamitra, from being from a rishi to a devotee. What was the association?
he was there are multiple factors that contributed to his, I guess, transformation. The particular one of how he came to bring Sri Ramachandra to Mithila is on the behest of Shatananda. So the commentators say that Shatananda particularly made a request. Could you please bring Ramachandra to Mithila via that place where Ahalya is? Because the words of the great sages Gautama and others had to be fulfilled. So he's serving a great person. And then there are other factors.
That explains something, but it doesn't explain the question. It explains why Vishwamitra, it's one of the factors, why Vishwamitra went all the way to Ayodhya to bring Ram to Mithila via Gautama's ashram, so the words of Gautama could be fulfilled by Ahalya being delivered by the touch of Ram. Great.
Right. The turning point from Brahmarshi to a devotee?
Yes.
That's the question?
Yes. Because our general understanding is bhakti awakens bhakti. So what was the bhakti? Now, maybe Gautama was the bhakta element, and through his son, that's how Vishwamitra got it. Through Vishwamitra, through Gautama's son, Chaitanya.
Yes, and his own elevation or practices made him, I guess, ready or recipient or willing to receive.
Good. And where does seed come from? When there's fertile soil, there's got to be a seed, right?
Yes. Exactly one person or who is not indicated.
Okay. That's it.
But Maharaj, you have previously said that when in such great personalities, if it is described that he has such association with Sita Devi or Ramachandra or the personality, we have to take it for granted that there was something or someone or multiple someones previously.
Yeah, that's the same question.
Yeah.
So it's unknown. That's the answer. Anyone else? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. There was a common theme that I saw in this whole story was that of power. Vishwamitra had a kind of power and Vashishta had another kind of power.
Yes.
And Vishwamitra wanted to reach there.
Yes.
But even after reaching there, Vashishta was at a whole different level because he was humble. He had something that Vishwamitra did not have.
Yes.
But then, from a very mundane perspective, you see both of them have power. So, what I was thinking is that in a world where people want power, how does it help in your devotional life as such? Like, when you have power, like, people respect you. Like, even when the other rishis were afraid of Vishwamitra, but other rishis were favorable to Vashishta. right?
Yeah.
They were not afraid of Vashishta.
Yeah.
So the responses is completely different, but
Yes.
and the kind of power is also different. So I was just curious as to what kind of, I mean, do we even aspire to have power in this
No.
life?
No, I mean, worldly people, conditioned souls, unavoidably desire. It's the nature of being a conditioned soul. Now, what does a desire for humility look like? Well, probably I'll be recognized as having a humble person. But, your questions, I'd like to address your specific question, and I'm trying to get a handle on what your specific question. Your question is it advisable to want power? No. But is it natural to want? Yes. So what to do about if it's not advisable yet it's natural?
It's like one of those unfulfilled desires that you have. How do you even address, I mean, do you even address that, or do you just let it be with your sadhana and then be like, Krishna, take care of it?
Well, no. Yes and no. Yes, mercy is essential, and no, cultivation of that, aspiring for that quality is also essential. Now, how do you aspire for humility? Because, oh yeah, I want to be humble, so I'll be recognized as a humble person. And it's just dirty. The heart's dirty, and it attracts dirt because it's got that kind of attraction for stuff. The answer, well, yes, there's two ways to answer. Bhakti has the power. This is Kapila Dev. Canto 3, chapter 25, speaking about Bhakti, verse 29, I think. Bhakti has the power to dissolve the subtle body, which is the covering of the soul. As long as there's the covering of the soul, as long as Bhakti isn't sufficiently strong, then there's going to be, wanting in the wrong way. We don't want to kill wanting, that's of the soul. But in the wanting in the wrong way, Bhakti has the power to dissolve it. Great. Now what about this humility thing? It's a nice topic. How do you get humility? Does Krishna just bestow it? Just do your bhakti and Krishna is going to bestow humility on you? Or do you strive for humility and you're not there yet, but you keep striving for humility and you're not there yet, and eventually Krishna will see, okay, they really want humility, here's that quality, or the covering, the subtle body covering is dissolved. That's an intense fire to dissolve the subtle body. Intense bhakti, tivra bhakti. There's a number of ways of saying the same thing in a different way. Here's one that I heard recently I like. It has a suspense factor. All of the great personalities have a carrier. Lord Shiva has his carrier, Lord Vishnu has his carrier, Ganga Devi has her carrier, everyone's got their carrier. So what's the carrier for Bhakti Devi?
Devotees.
It's humility. Humility carries Bhakti Devi to where she wants to go. It's a cute way of saying. How does that carrier look like? The humility carrier, Bhakti Devi. It's a heart that's in the heart. When the heart is in the state of humility, Bhakti is there. So is it a prerequisite for Bhakti? Yeah. But we're not there yet because we got this covering going on. And we're not really humble, we're kind of not there yet, humble. So it's a lot of, it's a profound experience and pursuit of real humility. It's a nice question.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I have a small question, Maharaj. This is related to one of the slides that show Ahalya Devi. In the slide, there is a snake shown, and I was wondering, is that a personality or is it somebody? If you go back to the slide.
A snake shown? I don't know.
Okay. It's like with its fin up like this. And
Cobra.
just opposite to Ahalya. And I was wondering what.
Let's ask Nityananda Pran. Do you know anything about that?
There's no backstory.
There's no backstory? No. It's ready though. Just artist.
Artist creativity.
Yeah, but.
He needs a forest scene.
Oh, forest scene? Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Even after becoming Brahma Rishi, he actually was trying to show the anger when he went to meet Dashrath Maharaj. So does it mean that he did not completely control his senses even after becoming Brahma Rishi?
Well, he wasn't ready to blast him. He simply said, it was with a tone apparently, is it just, please tell me, is this your final decision? Because after your final decision, I'll just leave the same path that I came. Now, that's not blasting him, but it's consequential, because if you offend a Brahmana, there's consequences without the Brahmana saying or doing anything. Now, it's a little bit like this earlier question that no one had that view about Vishishta. He was more powerful. No one was like, "Whoa, better watch out, Vishishta is going to blast you." They were just respectful. But, obviously, previously Vishwamitra was not. And at some point, his body became flames. His body became flames. And the devas said, "Whoa, take away that fire." And just instantly, boom. So now, the purpose behind, the functional purpose behind Vishwamitra's speaking the way that he spoke could have been, to get him to say yes. But he said he got to say yes because he had a good minister or priest. Vishishta. And Vishishta wasn't it was holding no animosity for that previous episode. So it's part and in part. He's not a pure devotee, but he's a Brahma Rishi. So he's not protected by Krishna in the same way that one who is a pure devotee is protected by Krishna. But we don't know what his intentions and feelings were. But Vishishtas, if it's an offense to a Brahmana, you got a big problem. Everybody in Vedic culture knows that. And he's a Brahmana. He's no longer a Kshatriya. He's a Brahmana. So, don't offend a Brahmana. Now, Durvasa I was hearing all these things. He got angry. Sounded like Durvasa. But Durvasa was a Brahmana. He wasn't a Kshatriya. when Brahmanas, there's all these things that happen all the time where some Brahmana curses somebody, something. But generally speaking, it's not always, but generally speaking, there's a silver lining. There's some benefit on the other end for that person, although it's not apparent. So go ahead, something further?
Yes, Maharaj. So, from Kshatriya to Brahmana, he was doing austerity.
Yes.
So, what made him to try to become a rishi rather than becoming a demon? Say, for example, even Ravana, even though he was doing austerity, he wanted to become more powerful, try to conquer the entire world,
Exactly.
something like that.
Exactly.
But here, Vishwamitra wanted to become a sage instead, but still hold on to the same destruction power that he wanted to acquire. So, I would like to know the difference.
He let go of that. Not instantly. Not instantly. I was thinking about this. His story, in contrast to Dhruva had Vishnu Bhakti because of Narada's association. And Vishwamitra didn't have Vishnu Bhakti because he didn't have Narada's association. He just had intense drive and determination and capacity for austerity like nobody can do. So he became powerful through that. It's well known, it's a big thing. Austerity makes one powerful. Even in modern times, austerity makes people powerful. So the specific question is, say the specific question again, because I kind of lost a handle on what you're specifically asking.
No, Maharaj. Even the Kshatriyas, they wanted to do austerity and become more powerful. Here, Vishwamitra also was trying to do, but he took a different path. Is there a reason that he took a different path to become a rishi rather than becoming kind of a demon, having a lot of power?
Oh yeah, he got this realization that says the mighty arms of a king with celestial weapons given by Lord Shiva is nothing compared to the power of a Brahmana. I want that power, the power of Brahma Tejas. That's why. And he was more intelligent than Ravana. His spirit wasn't demoniac. His spirit was he wanted power, but it wasn't demoniac power. And Ravana's demoniac power, of course, it was his purpose of his appearance, but he got it from his grandfather. Anyway, association makes a lot of difference.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So
It's nice to see who people are behind their mask.
yeah. So are we to understand from the fact that Vishwamitra got to serve Lord Ram that he eventually got humility?
I would say so. I mean, through association and service. I mean, he wasn't putting himself at the center. He was putting Ram at the center. And he was just doing the service of putting Ram at the center. And I mean, it's because I'm most familiar with Krishna Lila. If something like that happened in Krishna Lila, it sounded like one of the residents of Vrindavan. They don't need the spotlight on them. They want Radha and Krishna to come together. And he wants Sita and Ram to come together, and that was it. Mission accomplished. He's very happy. So he's not at the center. I mean, he is honored because he is who he is and so forth, but he wants them at the center. He could break the bow, but he wants Ram to break the bow. Anyway, he could kill, but he wants Ram to kill Tataka, and then give him celestial weapons for the whole purpose that he uses later. Okay, I think we're done. Yes? Okay.
Much this question is related to the humility you mentioned. I was contemplating how Hanuman carrying a lot of physical strength and mental strength and so much power.
Hanuman doing what?
Hanuman carrying a lot of physical strength and the mental strength and so many powers. Yet how he maintains the humility in front of Lord Ramachandra.
Oh, it's his nature. He just like, in his nature is service. That's how you maintain humility. It's not artificial. It's not like he doesn't have to check himself. He just likes service. And service comes from a place of humility. And that's like this question about Vishwamitra, did he actually become humble? It was just service.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Look what you got. Okay. I brought some too, but that's okay. Thank you. Hey, you want one?
Oh, thank you, sir.
What's this?